Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in the desert pulling apart ships. It's a long story, and it's one that started as a viewer recommendation from Nicked Fenix, someone in the What's It Like community who shares a similar taste in games to me. And at their recommendation, I added it to my watch list. As fate would have it, Ultimate Games approached me with a review copy to test out, so naturally, I just jumped at the chance. I'm a big fan of games that you can just switch your brain off and play, and Ship Graveyard Simulator 2 looked right up my alley. What's it like? Put on some gloves, grab a helmet, and prepare to violate every workplace health and safety law known to man as we review Ship Graveyard Simulator for Nintendo Switch. At its core, Ship Graveyard Simulator 2 is all about the grind, but in the best way. You buy a shipwreck, salvage what you can, complete a few quirky contracts, recycle the rest, and reinvest in better tools so you can do it all again just a little bit more efficiently. It's the kind of game that quietly pulls you into its loop without making much fuss. The core loop is simple and satisfying. Once you purchase a derelict ship, you board it and just start tearing it down piece by piece. You'll be smashing panels, torching bulkheads, and bonking, yes, that's the in-game term for it, bolts in a messy, methodical work. Each ship usually has around 3 random assigned contracts, like salvaging a certain amount of iron or recovering oddly specific items like clocks, dartboards, and even toilets. They add just enough structure to keep things fun and interesting, especially when you're chasing that final missing item hidden under a pile of rusted debris. Progression is mostly tied to your tool upgrades. You'll start with very basic gear that can barely scratch the surface, even bolts requiring multiple hits of your hammer, so the early hours of the game can feel a little bit slow, especially if you're trying to be thorough. In my case, I actually just skipped the contracts on my first wreck and scraped together enough cash for better tools and enjoyed the game a lot more when I could smash my way through things a little easier, because once you've got a halfway decent torch and grinder, the game starts to really flow and you get into a rhythm. There's not much in the way of narrative or hand-holding, and that really just works in its favour. Ship Graveyard Simulator 2 is a game for people who enjoy digging into the grind. And it's definitely not going to appeal to everyone. But if you enjoy games like Power Wash Simulator, there's a strong chance that this will scratch the same itch. Much like the hulking wrecks you dismantled, Ship Graveyard Simulator 2 looks a little rough on the Switch. The textures are extremely low resolution across the board, with characters and items that are enough to serve the gameplay, but it does give the whole game a distinctly cheap look. Performance holds together for most of the time, but it absolutely tanks under certain conditions, like for some reason using the blowtorch, or, understandably, collapsing large sections of the ship, which sends the frame rates into single digits. You'll be watching chunks of hull stutter to the ground at 3 to 4 frames per second slow motion, while the game tries to catch up with its own physics calculations. Sound design is minimal, with a few ambient clangs and a looping radio track in your truck, and there's some serviceable effects when you're hammering or torching or grinding. It does the job, but it doesn't really add too much atmosphere. Occasionally also there'll be overlapping panels that will cause visual flicking or artifacting, and still, if you're already on board with the kind of game this is, you probably won't mind the scrappy visuals too much. The controls in Ship Graveyard Simulator 2 are perfectly serviceable as well on the Switch. Nothing feels too clunky, and once you've got a handle on your tools, the process of dismantling ships flows smoothly enough. It's not especially polished, but it really just doesn't get in its own way either. Where things start to wobble though was the user interface. Some menus can be a bit awkward, especially when navigating upgrades or shopping for tools. It's functional, it's just not really refined, and sometimes it's hard to tell if you've missed a prompt while trying to cash in a contract. The game does include a snappy tutorial and it walks you through the basics rather quickly, and for the most part, it does a good job of explaining itself. That said, I did run into one moment where I thought I hadn't unlocked a feature, only to discover a crucial section hidden behind a hard to spot panel that required a blowtorch. These moments are rare, but they can slow down the otherwise steady pace of the destruction. Here's the thing, Ship Graveyard Simulator 2 probably doesn't look as enjoyable as it is at face value. With its low-res textures, its awkward physics, and its rather plain presentation, it feels like a game that should wear its welcome out fast. But boy did it sink its hooks into me, and it was just strangely hard to put down. There was something genuinely relaxing about dismantling a massive ship, one bolt and beam at a time, and I found myself playing for hours on end at a stretch, fully engrossed in the entire process. At one point, I even started experimenting by cutting out all the supports of a lower section of a ship just to watch it collapse in a glorious mess of orchestrated chaos. It wasn't efficient or necessary, but it was certainly just chaotic fun. And this is the kind of game that probably pairs perfectly with a movie in the background or your favourite playlists. I like to call these a podcast or Netflix type of game. It's just something to sink your teeth into when you want to zone out and grind for a bit. If you like the low-key satisfaction of clearing grime in Power Wash Simulator or the cozy repetition of House Flipper, then there's a good chance you'll find a similar groove here. For my wreckers looking into accessibility options, there aren't any additional features, so as always, I recommend further research into seeing if Ship Graveyard Simulator 2 suits your needs. And here's where scoring a game like this gets tricky. It's currently $26 Australian on the eShop on sale, which I think is decent value for the 15 to 20 odd hours I've already sunk into it. But the full retail price of $45 is probably a stretch. So I think your best bet is to grab it on sale and spend a lazy weekend tearing things down. There's a somewhat cathartic joy to it, and I guess it's really hard to score because personally, despite all the rust, I had a blast. But critically, on paper, it doesn't really hit a lot of the marks. And I guess that's why we say reviews are subjective. For those who like games like Power Wash Simulator, as I mentioned before, and find them a relaxing moment of zen, Ship Graveyard Simulator 2 will most likely satisfy, even if there's a bit of rust and mess that you have to put up with first. So, what's it like? Ship Graveyard Simulator 2 is like Power Wash Simulator, crossed with Car Mechanic Simulator. I award it a 60 out of 100. In the interest of full disclosure, a review copy was provided by the publisher, but this doesn't influence my score. Thanks so much for watching my video. If you liked it, the best way you can support What's It Like is by liking, subscribing, and sharing it with your friends. For more reviews, click on the thumbnails to the right, and for everything Nintendo, check out what'sitlike.com.au.